said, I work at BTI. I occasionally teach, and I can see one or two of BTI's students here. There's not an exam at the end of this, you'll be glad to know. But it's, the rest of you will be really good about that too, I'm sure. In 1519, the Spanish explorer and conquistador Hernando Cortes decided that he wanted to seize the treasure that the Aztecs had been hoarding. So he took 500 soldiers and 100 sailors and landed his 11 ships on the shore of the Yucatan. Despite the large army under his command, he was vastly outnumbered by a huge and powerful empire that had been around for 600 years. Some of his men were unconvinced of success, and being loyal to Cuba, they tried to seize some ships to escape to there. Cortes got wind of the plot and captured the ringleaders. He wanted to make sure that the remainder of his men were completely committed to the mission and to the quest for riches. So he did something that seemed completely insane. Cortes gave the order to burn his ships. The path forward for Cortes was clear. All or nothing, 100% commitment. The option of failure was gone. Conquer as heroes or die. And so Cortes's ships on his order were burned. Well, you can imagine how his men might have felt about this. Their level of commitment, not to say their level of stress, was raised to an extreme level. Much higher than they perhaps anticipated on the outward journey. But you know what was really incredible is they succeeded in this unlikely feat. In 600 years, no one else has been able to conquer the Aztecs and plunder their riches. They were able to do it simply because there was no choice, no fallback. The ships were gone, and the only alternative was death. Let's turn to our passage for today, Galatians 3, chapter from verse 1 to verse 14. It has, I think, the best opening line of any sermon I've ever preached. You foolish Galatians! Who has bewitched you? Before your very eyes, Jesus Christ was clearly portrayed as crucified. I would like to learn just one thing from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law or by believing what you heard? Are you so foolish? After beginning by means of the Spirit, are you now trying to finish by means of the flesh? Have you experienced so much in vain if it really was in vain? So again I ask, does God give you his Spirit and work miracles among you by the works of the law or by believing what you heard? So also Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. Understand then that those who have faith are children of Abraham. Scripture foresaw that God would justify the Gentiles by faith and announce the gospel in advance to Abraham. All nations will be blessed through you. So those who rely on faith are blessed along with Abraham, the man of faith. For all who rely on the works of the law are under a curse. As it is written, cursed is everyone who does not continue to do everything written in the book of the law. Clearly, no one who relies on the law is justified before God, because the righteous will live by faith. The law is not based on faith. On the contrary, it says, the person who does these things will live by them. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a pole. He redeemed us in order that the blessing given to Abraham might come to the Gentiles through Jesus Christ, so that by faith we might receive the promise of the Spirit. I don't know about you, but when you write an email or write a letter, if you still write letters, do you start by saying, "You fools"? Now, how does that work for you? Maybe you think that's a little mild. So you really go in for more. You call them bewitched. And you're not meaning the 1970s television sitcom. And you think to yourself, well, perhaps the message still hasn't quite got through. Perhaps it's just a little subtle. So you call them fools again. You suggest that they are perhaps idiots. Maybe even all the learning that they did was a waste of time, saying that they are vain. You know, there are some people in life, and you'll never die wondering what they think, because they'll tell you, often without asking. Well, Paul is one of those people. So what's got Paul so hot under the collar? What's got his knickers in a twist? What's caused him to get out on the wrong side of the bed? Who forgot to put that extra shot in Paul's morning coffee? Well, you can be relieved. You can take a breath. It's the people he's writing to in Galatia. What a miserable lot they must have been to get a letter like that. We're off the hook. But hang on. We're not really, are we? This passage is precisely written for those people who are listening to a sermon and think it applies to the person sitting next to them. Right. No, Paul says, I'm talking to you. Yes, you. Yes, that person who's looking at the dust on the carpet in a particularly examined way. Or if you're watching this online, you're the person reaching for the remote about to switch to Netflix. The crux of his complaint is this. So I ask you, does God give you his Spirit and work miracles among you by the works of the law, or by believing what you heard? The church at Galatia had really got caught up in rule keeping, and in so doing had neglected listening to the Spirit. For some people, they want the certainty of the rule book. They put their confidence in being seen to do the right thing. They take pride in how humble they really are. They find wisdom in obeying the rules no matter what, and being right all the time, and never putting a foot wrong, and living up to a set of expectations that not even Mother Teresa could follow. But this is all foolishness. Our identity, our confidence, our security, our hope, our joy, our peace, and our purpose is not found in prescriptive rule keeping, but in the person of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, great.
Right.
In a relationship with him in whom we live and move and have our being. And the thing about that is that Jesus shakes us out of counting the regulations and instead says, follow me. You know what? Jesus said, follow me to a lot of people. The Pharisees, the religious leaders of the day, they didn't follow him. The fisherman, the prostitute, the tax collector, the zealot, they all did. Which group are you in? Are you like the woman at the well who feels so shunned by those around you, by your past, that you go out to collect water in the heat of the noonday sun when no one else will be around? And there in the pounding heat, in the unbearable loneliness, and the crushing shame, you meet Jesus. And he listens to you. And he befriends you. And he gives you hope. And he gives you a future. And he says, I am the water of life, and those who come to me will never thirst. Are you like Peter, who once loved Jesus so passionately that he was prepared to die for him, but then in this great moment of embarrassment said he didn't even know Jesus, but yet he was so desperate to see him again? Do you, like Peter, see Jesus on the beach beckoning you to come? Do you hear him say the words, I love you? Do you hear him say, feed my sheep? Are you like the two men on the Emmaus road in grief and sorrow because your Messiah has been killed? Hope has been lost, and the world as you know it has ended. You know, that might be your feeling right now in this COVID-19 world. That everything you once held certain is gone. Maybe your job's gone. Maybe your marriage is gone. Maybe your sense of purpose has gone. Do you want to see, like those men on the Emmaus Road, Jesus walking with you? Do you want to invite him in for a meal? Do you want to break bread with him? Do you want joy to swell in your hearts as you hear him open the scriptures? Do you want to say to him, as the Emmaus Road people did, stay with us, for it is almost night? Do you want the light of Christ to pierce your darkness? Do you want the water of life to quench your thirst? Then burn your ships. Burn your ships. Cast aside those vain securities that won't hold you. Instead of looking at the rule book, look to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, and be free. Be free. Know that Jesus loves you. You know, one of the things I think that everybody, and I think actually especially Christians, the thing that keeps them up at night the most is the question, does Jesus really love me? Does Jesus really love me? The unequivocal answer is yes.
Good word.
You are his child. You are his friend. And he loves you. The foolish people who set their star by doing good miss the star above Bethlehem that led wise men to Jesus. The foolish people that store up treasures on earth miss the pearl of great price that is knowing Jesus. The foolish people who look down on those whose lives have been marked by pain ignore the pain in their own hearts and their need for Jesus. The foolish person thinks that they are free because they only colour within the lines. The wise person knows that their freedom is following Jesus wherever those lines go. Following Jesus is so much more uncomfortable than following the rules. But it is vastly more fulfilling. And if you're thinking, but does that then mean I should break all the rules? I would say this. Follow Jesus and you'll find the rules pale into insignificance. And that as you grow in him and in his love for you, those rules will take on a different perspective. There'll be markers perhaps on the journey, signposts even, but we don't stop at the signpost. We don't study it, remark on how it looks, analyze the direction it's pointing. No, we go to where it says we should, and that's to Jesus. Now you might be saying at this point, give me the matches and I'll burn my ships. I'm with Jesus all the way. And maybe you said that once. But then life happened. We suffered loss, or we got distracted. We experienced deep hurt. We found that things didn't quite make sense as we'd hoped they might. There was a chasm that emerged between our expectations of Christians and of Christ and our experience of them. And into that crept disappointment and maybe bitterness. So what do we do? Well, if we've been like Cortez and his men and burned our ships, we can't go back. That's the whole point of burning the ships. We could look out forlornly into the ocean at the embers of those ships, like waiting to be rescued from a desert island and to return to a life we once knew. This, of course, was the experience of the Israelites, freed from slavery and being led into the promised land. And for a trip that should have taken a lot less time, it took 40 years. And you know what they did? It wasn't so much that they got lost, but rather that they complained an awful lot. They look back through rose-tinted spectacles at a life of slavery, which at the time they couldn't wait to get out of. You know that you've lost perspective when slavery looks better than freedom. God provided for them in the desert, and they said it didn't taste that good. It wasn't up to MasterChef standards. The Lord led them with a cloud by day, and they complained that all they wanted was blue skies. The Lord led them by a fire at night, and they just wanted to make camp and toast their marshmallows rather than keep moving. They got impatient, and they made idols, and they forgot about where they were going. They got so distracted by the signpost that they sat down and wrote books about the colour of the signpost, its history, disputed about who the sign writer was, and took selfies with it and put it on Instagram. Well, I don't know about that. But they forgot that the point about a signpost is not to examine the signpost, but to go in the direction that it's pointing.
Right.
This was the kind of thing Paul was getting so hot under the collar about. The Galatians, like the Israelites in the desert, had forgotten their North Star, had said that their faith had to be based on Christ and something else. This was what Scott talked about last week. Had tied their identity into what others thought and how they compared. Had got so lost in the rules and regulations, in the finer details of what actually constituted living a good life, that they totally took their eyes off the life giver. They totally took their eyes off the life giver. So what shall we do? Well, plant a tree. Plant a tree. Psalm 1 says this: Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way the sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. We can put our roots down in the soil of the Spirit of God. And you know, the thing about trees is that the deeper their roots are, the sturdier they are. I've spent most of my life in Wellington, which is a wonderful but windy city. Well, one evening there was a spectacular storm in our neighbourhood, and a whole lot of trees came crashing down. One of our neighbours woke up to find that 2 of his minis parked in the driveway had been crushed under the weight of the trees that landed on them. I don't think there's much more of a moral to that story except to be careful where you park your car. All of you are thinking right now, is my car parked under a tree? But we know that a tree with strong roots is less likely to fall down in a storm. And if there was ever a time we needed strong roots, if there was ever a time where we're facing a storm, it's right now. So how do we have those strong roots in God? We delight in the law of the Lord, Psalm 1 says. We meditate on his law day and night. The only people I know who delight in the law are lawyers. I once sang in a choir full of lawyers, and believe me, they could get very excited, a little too excited actually, about whether the composer really meant to put a quaver or a semiquaver, and what andante really meant as a musical direction. To delight in something is to take pleasure in it, to find joy in it, to spend time lingering with it. Jesus said that he came not to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. So what I think that means in the context of our Galatians passage is that meditating on the law, delighting in the law, and knowing the law is because it points us to Jesus.
Yeah, right.
Because it points us to Jesus. It is the reflection of Jesus in the law that gives us joy, that brings us delight, that draws us closer to him as we love and know him more each day and as we know that he loves us. What brings you delight? What ships do you need to burn? Where do you need to plant your tree? Are you looking at the signpost instead of where it's pointing? There's an old hymn that some of you might know, and the lyrics go like this. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Though none go with me, still I will follow. No turning back. No turning back. The world behind me, the cross before me. If you want to know, does Jesus really love me? Look at the cross before you. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. No turning back. No turning back. My encouragement to each one of us is to burn our ships and to plant our trees. To not turn back, but to look forward. And in looking forward and looking to Jesus to find freedom, to find delight, and to hear every day the call from Jesus when he says, follow me. And we say, yes, Lord, I will follow.